Well, we have a special guest today to give our presentation. Seth Oveson is the manager of the local government programs at the Office of the State Auditor here for the state of Utah. And we've had Seth on before, and he's a great resource to help us in understanding the resources of the auditor's office and also what some of the requirements are. But today we've asked Seth to talk about fraud prevention. We've had a challenging year and decade, really, when it comes to various different frauds and schemes and cyber schemes and all of those things. And so we've asked Seth to talk about preventing fraud. So we'll turn the time over. Seth, you can talk about your office and yourself a little more, but I wanted to get right to the subject so we can listen. Seth.
Thank you guys for letting me be here. I've done a couple of presentations with the trust. The last one that we did was also on fraud prevention. But this time we're going to take a little bit of a different look at things. So it should, there we go. It's like, why won't my slide advance? So last time I spoke with you guys, it was on occupational fraud. Occupational fraud is what we consider when a fraud happens and it's coming from within the entity. Typically, it involves insiders. There's a level of trust and a level of access that you don't see when we're talking about fraud that's coming from outside the entity. This is a representation that we do when we talk about fraud. If you've done any of our presentations or any of our YouTube videos, you'll recognize this. When we're dealing with that occupational fraud, you're talking about having your employees and what goes into a fraud. There's opportunity. Somebody's going to rationalize their decisions. There's pressure on why they're motivated to take money. Today, we're still going to talk about the fraud triangle, but we're only going to look at the one side, because when there's a fraud happening, it's happening from outside of your entity. You have no leeway on whether or not they're going to rationalize and what they're thinking when they're committing fraud. They've already made that decision, and you don't know anything about the pressures that they have. What you have is the opportunity, and that's the only part of that fraud triangle that you get to work with when you're getting attacks coming from outside of your entity. So this is fraud from outside of the entity. There's things that are going to happen. And one of the big things is they're going to go for those same things that you have when you have an occupational fraud, a trusted employee or access, but they need to obtain that coming, cold turkey. And the most common way that happens is through social engineering. And I don't know if people are comfortable or know much about social engineering, but let me just pull this one up right here. Social engineering is, in some places, it's defined as the use of deception to help individuals get individuals to divulge personal information that can be used for fraudulent purposes. Okay. Sometimes you'll hear the term phishing or spoofing, and a lot of things, that personal information that they're going for would be passwords or updating information, addresses or routing numbers. And an example of this that we've seen recently would be, a city that has their information out there, and they're going to go for a new construction process. They're going to build a swimming pool or a library or whatever it is. There's a lot of controls in that process that are there for public involvement, and especially in a public setting like a government. You're going to advertise, you're going to put it out there and say, hey, we're going to go for an RFP. There's going to be multiple public hearings and meetings on a big project like that. So that information's already out there. It's going to be, the bid process is going to happen. You're going to award it. Everybody's going to know who has that bid and what's being built. Now, say you have a city and they've gone through that process. They've followed everything how they were supposed to, just, follow their purchasing policy and everything's good. They begin work. And then as the process is going through, the contractor submits progress billing. The progress billing goes through, and whoever at the city has gone through and they've reviewed it and they made sure the work really happened, and they've submitted a PO and it went to their accounts payable office and it's got all of the signatures, everything's good. And they go and they process that payment and the payment goes through. But a phishing or spoofing in this case, the way that they would do it is they would contact the accounts payable clerk. And that accounts payable clerk, and they'd say, hey, I am from whichever, contractor that's building this building for you. How are you? And they kind of build, a lot of times they'll build some relationship. They'll try to build some relationship, and they'll call and they'll say, hey, I'm with this company. And then they'll call again, another week later or whatever. And so that they're getting used to talking to that person and trying to build some trust there. And then they will come and they will say, hey, we need to update our information, or here we want to give you a new W-9. We want to give you new information here. And they'll provide that information to them. And all they have to do is attack one or two aspects of it. For instance, if they were to say, hey, we've built a new building and we're moving offices. We need to update our address with you guys so that you send the check to the right place. Okay. Well, if the accounts payable clerk takes that and just updates the information from that phone call, or if they update the routing number, which would be even worse, from just that phone call, then even though all of the other controls that are in place, the signatures, everything else, they've targeted that little piece of information. And when the city processes those payments, it'll go through and they'll cut the check just like they should, but they send it to the wrong place. Well, that can go on for multiple times. The contractor's building it. Well, I'm working for the government. We haven't gotten that last month's progress payment yet. Maybe they're just being slow. Submit the next one, and there have been instances in the state where a fraudulent entity or fraudulent person has been able to steal, millions, over $1 million, because, hey, if I've got one progress payment and that's 800,000 and the next one's, 500 or 600,000, they could walk away with over $1 million just because they took the time to call and get a routing number changed in someone's accounts payable system. Okay. The FBI, this information right here, full disclosure, business email compromise or BEC. This comes from the FBI's website, and these are their things, and the different steps to have a business email compromise. The first thing that happens would be identifying a target, and that's why governments are especially at risk. If you were to target a business, you'd have to know key information about that business. Well, all of the key information about a government is readily accessible from their last set of minutes. If I wanted to target any government in the state, all I'd have to do is go to the public meeting website, which everybody's required to do, and look at their last set of minutes. Well, I know who the board chair is. I know who the board members are. I'll probably know who the staff is because they're going to be presenting at those minutes. And in, less than a half an hour, I could gather all of the information that I need from any governmental entity to identify which target I want to pick. Okay. Now, the transparency website is important. It's in statute, public notice website, your entity's website, all of those things are important, and they're not going to go away. So what we need to do is we need to take away the opportunity for entities to go and do things. Grooming, just like if I help coach wrestling, and they always have you do the safe sports trainings every year. And a lot of it, they talk about grooming. And it's the same terminology is used with fraud, because they're trying to build trust through phone calls or emails that will make you be willing to give up that information or change information in your system without really verifying it. So typically it's identifying the target, which is very easy for people to do with governmental entities. And then they would, go through the grooming process to try to get that trust. It could be from different emails, phone calls. Once that trust is there, where they feel like a level of trust is there, then would come the request. Okay. Typically, those requests are for wire transfers of money. This is another example that we had a couple of years ago. A fraud happened, and they targeted all of the counties. So they targeted 29 counties. And they sent these requests. What they did is they sent out the request, and they spoofed the email address of the board chair or the commission chair for different counties. And from the website, they could find out who that was. They also knew who the treasurer was, because most websites say, well, who's the county treasurer? They're elected officials, their information's public. And they sent requests from a commissioner to the treasurer saying, hey, we need to transfer $10,000 to here's the information for the company. And this is the work that they're doing for us. And we need that transferred before the end of the week, or we need it transferred by the end of the day. And in this case, 2 of the 29 counties actually bet on this fraud. They got the information. Well, the commissioner wanted it. They wanted it done now. And those treasurers, they jumped on it and they transferred the money and sent it off. And come to find out later, that bank account was a bank account in the Cayman Islands, and the money was gone. So that's 2 instances of fraud, happened very quickly. And these kind of fraudulent cases happen because it's a very low risk for the person committing the fraud. They just had to send an email 29 times, changing a couple of names that went out there, and they got a $20,000 payoff with very little effort. Okay. This is something that we can do that's very easy to check. Okay, this is an email that I sent to myself this morning, and I want to go over a couple of things for you. If you see there on the top part of the email, and I can use my mouse right here, whenever you receive an email, there is that little drop down message. You can click on that drop down arrow, and it will give you information. It usually says show details. Anytime you get an email from someone that you're not sure, I always click that drop down arrow and see the show details. And if you were to click on this email showed up as holiday rewards is what it showed up on my email. But when you click the show details, it'll show that this email was from Stop Junker Dom Boga Cash Pony McFud Connor at Palmer, whatever. They will use those because they're generic junk email addresses that can be created and then deleted, but they look like something that is. So they could create one that said it was from Seth Oveson. But when you actually clicked on the show details, you would see that it's from a random email address. It's not from Seth Oveson at utah.gov. And that is one way that they spoof an email address. So if you ever get a request that's odd, that's the first thing you do. Check that one. If you were to forward that email, like when I forwarded it to myself, it actually gives you the details of it instead of just the truncated version of it. But if you were just to show up in your inbox, what you would see is just holiday rewards or Seth Oveson. But when you actually click the show details right here, you will get the full email address of where it's at. We used to be able to say, hey, one of the biggest things when you get a fraudulent email was spelling errors. That's not necessarily the case anymore. We used to get a lot of, attacks coming from South America or China or India, but their spelling has gotten a lot better and it's a lot trickier and harder to find. So instead of just looking for spelling errors, take a look at that and the email address and make sure that it's correct. If you're looking at this email here, there's a couple of other things that are red flags that you should notice. Probably the biggest one is that word in the subject line, congratulations. anytime someone you don't know congratulates you, or even someone you do know congratulates you for something or offers you something, it is most likely a fraudulent deal. I just, anytime a congratulations comes, maybe it's because I worked in the government too long, I'm too skeptical, but if someone's congratulating for something, hey, you've got this free reward, free concert tickets, whatever it is, you don't want to click on those. Another red flag that shows up on this email, if you look at it, is you can look at the time. This was sent at November 7th, 2022 at 4:06 in the morning. Okay. A lot of these type of emails will happen early in the morning, late at night, when servers have space and they're using them to crank out the spam emails. You know, they will send out thousands of these emails because all they need is for one person to click on it to get that access, to get, you know, if they're trying to upload malware, they can do it that way. It's a high return for them to send out thousands of emails. They only need one or two to click on it to make it worth their while. Okay. So those are three things on this email that I received this morning. Look at the email address, make sure that it's coming from who it really is, coming from who you think it is. Okay. Be wary of emails that are coming at odd times. This one's one that we see if someone has clicked on this email, say there's a link on here, and someone within your entity clicks on it. Well, they can upload malware onto the computer of that person. And if that person doesn't sign out of their computer at night and it's still running, sometimes that can give access to the person to utilize that computer and actually utilize their true email address. So, you know, if I know Jason, he just did the thing. If he were to send me an email at 2 o'clock in the morning, I should question that, because he's probably not going to email me at 2 o'clock in the morning. And anytime I get what?
I might.
Okay. But most people won't, especially in government. You know, if they're sending you emails early in the morning, they should be questioned off the get-go. Okay. And you should look at those and make sure that it's so that's just an example. That was one of the many examples that I deleted out of my inbox this morning. Okay. And I wanted to pick one from today because I wanted to be able to show you it happens every day. If you have an email address that's out there, you probably receive a fraudulent email at least one a day, probably more. And that kind of gets me to one of those things, is not just looking and recognizing, hey, this is probably a fraudulent email, but other things that you can do. Every entity should have good policies. Okay. And this is one of those things that you should look at. The governing body members from your entity can tell you to do your job. They can't tell you to not do your job. So if you've been hired to be the accounts payable clerk and make sure that things are proper and paid in a correct way, or if you're the treasurer and you have policies in place to safeguard public funds, and you have someone contacting you via email or phone even, and they're telling you to not do your job, that's not appropriate. They can tell you to do your job. They can tell you to do your job quickly and efficiently, but telling you to skip over those policies, that is generally where things happen. If you remember that the case with those counties, the scam person, they spoofed the email of a governing body member and told the treasurer to transfer money without following policy. Most of the county treasurers, they received that and they said, their response was, well, that's fine. You know, I need you to fill out a PO so that I can transfer that $10,000. And they got no response back because it was a fraudulent email. And they didn't have access to the forms to fill out a PO. If the PO process is to go into a password protected portal and fill out the purchase order information and they don't have access to that portal, then they're not going to be able to follow the policy as they should. And so they just usually respond back with an email saying, hey, I know that this is, I know that's policy, but we can take care of that on the back end. We really need to get this done today. Well, that's them asking you to not follow the policy. And and you can't do that one. The other thing that is, entities should adopt a policy that requires you to verify account changes with existing information that you have. For instance, in that example with the city, if someone calls and says, hey, we want you to change our address because we've moved to a new place, you should already have their phone number on file, and you should contact their advertised or your current thing and verify that they really are moving with someone that you have met in person, that you know, not the person that you're just talking to on the phone that says that they're with that person, but verify that they really are. You can do that through their entity website. You have current contact lists. You don't just, if they were to even send you a normal letter and they were to provide you a phone number to call, don't call the number that they give you, call the number that you know really belongs to them. Say, hey, we received this request to change your address. We have a form that you need to fill out. Here it is, okay? And you provide it to the normal contact person, not just whoever's requesting it. Those are some helpful hints that you can do things to make things run smoother. And that's really the question there, is following those policies. And sometimes you have to think with your deceptive hat. Say, hey, if I were someone trying to steal or gather that information, what information would I need? How am I going to get it? And then put those steps in place to verify, not calling the same number back, but calling somebody else, okay? These type of frauds are very common. And the reason why they're so common is because, like I mentioned before, there is not a lot of, what's the downside? If I send out a whole bunch of spam emails fishing for information, and what do you do when you receive a fraudulent email? You get it and you go, oh, yep, that's junk. And I hit delete, or I put it to the spam folder, and I move on across my day. Well, if that's all I do, there's really no teeth in that to dissuade somebody from continuing to do that, because I could set out thousands and thousands of these fake emails. On the 4 or 5 that somebody responds back, and I can steal a couple $1,000s from them. Well, it's pretty easy money with low risk. This is a place where you can report fraud. This is from the Utah Department of Public Safety and the SIAC, which is the Statewide Information and Analysis Center. And if you look where those yellow arrows are pointing, there are ways to report tips. So if you were to get a request for somebody fishing for information, you can send it to that Statewide Information and Analysis Center, and they keep track, and they're looking for these phishing attempts. They have a newsletter that can send out and that you can subscribe to as they see these, people reporting back, and they have different tips that are coming in. They can put out alerts saying, hey, these things are happening. Right now, I subscribe to the SIAC. Around November, there's a lot of ones about elections, because people like to take advantage of people when they know that something's happening that has an emotional appeal, because people don't think as well when there's emotions involved. So there's a lot of election related fraudulent schemes that happen. But you can submit those cybercrime tips. There's tips that they have on there that you can look at with your entity and go through things. And if you're looking at your policies on how to make sure you're updating information, if you're following the best tips, these are probably the best ones that you have. The other people that can provide help and support when you're dealing with fraud and reporting fraud. So there's the Utah Department of Public Safety. There's the Statewide Information and Analysis Center, which specifically deals with cybercrime and tips. There's the State Bureau of Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Both of those have cybercrime task force that work specifically with cybercrime, phishing, spear phishing. Phishing is where you send out a blast to all all of your employees. Spear phishing would be you're targeting them just more specifically for specific attributes. But this is where you can report those things, and or subscribe to their newsletter and get more information back and tips that how you can help protect your entity. I like this one because instead of just hitting delete, I can take the time and submit, the tip or the email that someone was doing a phishing scam against my entity. I can send it to them and they can analyze it and try to get it on the radar and make it so that a state agency is actually trying to go after them and trace them down. The reason why these type of fraudulent things happen so often is because I can send out thousands of emails phishing for information and nobody's ever going to come back and try to get me. They just hit trash and they're gone. But this is one way that you can actually kind of push it back on them and get the information to a state agency that can attempt to do the analysis and track them down and actually limit it. It does take a little bit of time to have a form. You click on that, you have to put in the information. You can attach whatever email that they sent to you, and then they can look at that. They receive a lot of them, so they're not going to give you feedback back and say, hey, thank you for helping us catch this crime, but it does help, and it provides them information to do that analysis. So
can I put an exclamation point on that?
yeah.
It seems like there's a real stigma. People don't ever want to admit that, hey, we got phished, or hey, we got cyber ransomed, or whatever it may be. And so they're hesitant to say we got. And I think that's a real oversight for the vast majority that's out there. We don't want to admit that we were wrong. I didn't get scammed, but I replied to one of those emails that looked like it was coming from Steve Hansen, the CEO here at the trust. And I didn't give up any information or anything like that, but it was a quick email. I looked at it on my phone. I was going into an appointment and I responded back, I'll get back to you when I'm done with this appointment. That's all the information I gave him. I walked into Steve's office shortly thereafter and said, hey, what did you want? He says, what are you talking about? And it was, oh, I got it. I'm the guy that's supposed to be aware of these things and telling everybody about it. And I responded to a bad guy out there looking for information. Let's admit it and get this information where there are people that can do some good with it, so we can stop these guys. Anyway.
Yep.
Other things that entities can do is you can do your own. If depending on the entity size and what you have, you can. They did it with the state a couple of years ago. Was it 1 or 2 years ago? They did some training things, and the state will sometimes send out their own phishing email. In this case, the state sent one out saying, "Hey, we have Hamilton tickets." When Hamilton was up north. You just need to respond and get these tickets. And they send it out to everybody, all of the state employees, looking for who would click on that information. And what they were asking for was your state, email. You had to give them your state email and phone number and stuff. And they're trying to, do this as a training exercise. And most of the state employees didn't click. They recognized it for what it was, and they didn't click. But the thing that the state was looking for was how many were going to report. So we have within our organization, DTS, the Department of Technology Services, and when we receive one from our entity, we're supposed to report that into them so that our IT people can look through and make sure that things aren't happening. If 1 or 2 employees report, hey, this happened, then they can actually look at it they can open up that email on a quarantined computer and look and see, okay, what's happening? What kind of malware are they trying to download? And they can make sure that the whole system, the whole network is protected. So depending on your entity size, if you're an entity of decent size and have an IT staff, you should have policies that when you receive this type of email, a phishing attack or a spoofing attack, whatever it is, that you know who to report that to. And maybe their process is to report it up to the SIAC. But at least at the entity level, you should report those so that you can make sure that your firewall is taking care of things,
that they're eliminating those spam emails and keeping your entity safe. If we kind of go back to, if I were to flip back to those other slides, what the intention of these outside frauds are trying to do is they're trying to gain access, trying to get the foot in the door, where they're trying to fake that trust and get it built up so that they can then get access to the system. One of the ones that I like to mention that's one that we've seen a couple of times is not all entities have good forms for updating information for employees. If you don't have that within your entity, that's one that you're going to want to look at and update your policies. Don't just take it over the phone and say, hey, I'm Seth Oveson's wife, and we've got a new bank account, and I want to add this bank account so that part of his check is going to take care of this loan that we've set up. Well, if you take that from just somebody calling in on the phone, they could add a bank account that's not really that employee's bank account, and part of their check will be diverted, which, all of the other policies and procedures that you have in place to protect payroll, supervisors' signatures, time cards, all of that stuff, if you leave a weakness that someone can just call in and change a routing number and take a portion or all of an employee's paycheck, that's a rough one. So make sure that there are forms and where the person comes in person or through a secured portal where they have to log in and update that type of information. The other thing that I want to make sure that we just kind of touch on a little bit before I finish is what you do with your computer at the end of the workday. A lot of people, they're busy, have got to get out the door, and they just leave. Oh, I'm halfway through this project, and they leave it up and running. That's one of the things that you should avoid, and you should train your employees to shut off and turn off your computers at the end of the workday. Because if someone has managed to get some sort of software uploaded onto your computer, that's when they can use your computer against other employees, either your email or access different things that are secured. But if it's turned off and it's not connected to anything, they can't use that computer. And then when your normal updates come in, you'll be able to get those things fixed, and you won't have those same problems. Whereas if it's just gone to sleep and it's sitting there on your desk, they can wake the thing back up if they have your credentials, and then they can do all kinds of harm that could have been avoided if you'd had those procedures to shut things off. So this is just my contact information. If you have questions or you want to talk about different things that are happening within your organization or need help recovering after there's fraud, I mean, obviously there's the trust that you're going to contact and say, hey, we've had a breach, help. But there are some resources if you need to, we've seen this happen several times throughout the state. If you need to have somebody to talk to and say, hey, this has happened, and where do we go from here? You're welcome to reach out to me or my team, and we'll help however we can. So Jason, that's the presentation I had for today, but I'd love to hear if there's any questions we can go through this.
Awesome, Seth. Thank you so much, folks. If you've got a question or a comment, type that into the chat box right now, and we'll get Seth to answer those. We did have a comment here that one of the viewers said that they'd had a breach where a developer's accountant had revealed some information like email addresses to a scammer. And so it may be somebody that we're close to, somebody that we're working with that can reveal information or insert themselves into an email chain or something like that.
Yep. And that's another thing that's important. If you work in tandem with another organization very closely, for instance, my team uses a program that's called Salesforce. It's a customer management software. That's the backbone for when your governmental entities submit your budgets, your financial statements, all of those things. It's running through this Salesforce interface, which allows us to create unique passwords and upload all of those things. Because we are so integrated with that, when we do our audit at the state level, there are different assurances that we have to obtain from those key software providers, which you might not be aware of. But if you're using a certain billing software or whatever, as the professional standards have evolved, you may get a request from your CPA firm to get the certificate of, the security certificates and more information from those key software components, because the industry, the auditing industry, recognizes that those can be weaknesses as well. It's not just what you have in your entity, but also those key suppliers, software providers and stuff. So if you're in that kind of situation for like a municipality, I would think, maybe utility providers, billing type things like that, that could have vulnerabilities. Your external auditors may request additional information on that sort of thing if they identify that as a potential weakness or a significant risk.
Great. Thank you, Seth. Let's see. Before turning off our computers at the end of the day, check with your IT team to make sure it is okay. It may be when updates are taking place and could put you at risk. All right, that must be coming from an IT pro. So, looks like those are the questions that we have. I thought with the number of people we have on here that we'd have a number of those.
We do have another question, Jason.
Is there another one? Did I miss it?
Yeah, what's the suggestion on how to handle remote access on computers?
Okay, our general suggestion and what we have from the state is that we don't allow remote access to computers. For instance, if I were to get on something, and I know that sometimes it happens with customer help, if it's a supported, hey, I'm using a specific accounting software. Sometimes the process for that is, hey, I'm going to go in and I'm going to send in my help desk ticket, and then I'm going to log on with the person and they remote access onto my machine, and we walk through how to fix it. If you have initiated that, that's one thing. If you ever got a request from somebody else to join and remote access something, our standard answer is no. Especially in today, I mean, I can go onto a Zoom meeting and I can say, okay, share it. You can share your screen with me to show me what you're doing, but I would never do like the ActiveX controls where I could go in and actually manipulate your computer. If you had to do it and hey, show me what you're looking at, okay, we can do things. At our state level, generally, like if somebody calls and says, hey, I need questions, I have questions with my budget, what I'll say is email me your budget, and I'll pull up their budget and I'll say, okay, I'm looking at your budget on my screen, you're looking at it on your screen, this is what's wrong with it. They don't have to give me access to their computer, and we, from our entity's point of view, we don't call and ask for access to computers. So if you ever did get one from the state auditor's office saying, hey, let me go in and control your computer, we wouldn't do that. And we wouldn't let somebody else come into ours. It'd have to be a very good reason that was documented why before you'd be able to do something like that. So,
right, the specific person is asking about like when they work from home, they have to remote into their desktop, which means they can't shut their computer off.
Yeah.
So have you guys seen that where they have to leave their desktop computer on in the office so that when they work at home, they can remote into that desktop computer, have all the applications and things that they need in order to do their job from home?
Yeah. I think most entities have handled that by saying remote computer users use a entity controlled laptop and they carry it back and forth with them. For instance, I have a setup at the state capitol with some screens and a little thing for my laptop. So when I'm up there, I use the laptop and the screens that are up there, and then I take my computer with me. And when I'm at home, I use the laptop and other screens down here, instead of having a desktop that's on all the time. I think if you were in that situation where that was where you were at, that computer, someone with the entity would have to go on and make sure that it was updated and you know, shut down and then brought back up and updated as it was supposed to keep those updates on. That's another one that I should probably put in a plug for as well. One of the reasons why we encourage people to turn off their computers and turn them back on is because most of the updates run when they're turned off and turned back on. Again, you love it when you get in and you boot up your computer and it says, oh, there's updates. You need to make sure that your computer's updated so that you're not vulnerable to different things. So those are some concerns that you have. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you should recognize that it is a potential vulnerability and make sure that those things are happening and getting it updated and not having it vulnerable.
Well, thanks, Seth. This has been great information today. You've got your contact information there. You're open to questions. If our local government agencies have concerns or questions, they can give you a call or an email.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, folks, for attending today. We appreciate you taking some time here to learn about this important information. It's a challenge that we all face every day, and I attended a conference recently, and they presented that they said there are trillions of attacks on a daily basis. That's what we're facing, and so we can't let our guard down. So thank you so much, Seth. We appreciate you and the auditor's office for all the work that you do out there, and we just encourage everybody to go out and have a safe day. Thanks, Seth. Thank you so much. That was
thanks, Seth.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Have a good day.